G'day guys and welcome to the Centre Bounce, where today we will be talking about the derby, or the derby, however you Western Australians like to say it, between Fremantle and West Coast. Stay tuned. Big J, before I even start talking about this game, I do have to tell the viewers that today is your birthday. So a very, very happy birthday to you, mate. Look at you, the commitment, the dedication on your birthday. You're getting a video out. Much props to you, my friend.
Oh, mate, thank you very much. It's been a good day, and I think it's one of those ones where I had a look the other day. Well, no, not the other day. I had a look a couple of hours ago, and it was like 18 days until like round one starts. I'm like, we've got to get all this stuff come out. Like, or this time's running out, and there's no days off at the moment. So thank you very much. And I mean, you had a good day today alongside a few other people, and yeah, really good day. Just nice to be able to talk some Supercoach as well and talk footy with someone who likes footy, because as you know, all my friends don't like footy. You're the only one that was there, so yeah, good to be here.
And talking footy, we are talking about the Fremantle Dockers kicking 84 points, defeating the West Coast Eagles, who scored 46. They still, I think, they beat us by a goal, West Coast. So we officially were the worst scoring team, the Dons, in the match sims this week. So congratulations to Fremantle. It really was an interesting game. A bit scrappy, yes. General theme across the week was, first hit out for a lot of these teams. But I think there was some good endeavor, and I think some of the real top echelon players weren't, scrappy like everybody else were. They definitely put on a show, the top tier players from both teams, and it was actually not too bad to watch.
Yeah, the scoreline obviously says the game was one way, but as you say, I think the game wasn't a bad one. Some players did well, some players didn't do so well. Harley, Reid, a bit of an injury scare there. We'll talk about in the next part of this video, but yeah, it wasn't too bad. I think, as you said at the start of this, right, the game definitely had the elements of, hey, look, we're only going to play these guys for a certain amount of time. We're not going to, bust their guts and do all these other things like maybe you would do later on, or at least a lot of these teams heading into round one. I think round two, the second preseason game we'll see next week is definitely going to have a lot more like consistency, and teams are going to play the best 22 versus this game, which was very much just cool. Let's get guys from the park. And we saw that with Freo. I don't think as much with West Coast, but if you look at the teams that were named before this game, it was literally West Coast has named 27 players. Freo has named 42 players. So I'm just like, you knew what you were going to get out of it. So a lot of Freo players got rested in the second half, and then even in the fourth quarter, a lot of their what you'd consider to be VFL quality players came on and did decently. Whereas West Coast were kind of hamstrung with, hey, let's play our best team for that 4 quarters.
Yeah, I don't think West Coast have enough fit players to ever be able to field that many. There's got. I've honestly said this so many times. There's got to be something in the water over there that's really awesome. Some curse or something.
COVID relief team still around? They can go back and get all those like has-beens. Maybe all like your delisted players from other clubs. Call them up, say, hey, we need you to come back. Let's go.
It might be the Hungry Jack's sponsorship. I mean, if you're sponsored by a fast food joint, maybe it's the Hungry Jacks. Too many Whoppers and stuff. That's causing these poor West Coast players to keep going down. And as you mentioned, there was another injury scare in this game to their Messiah, the most hyped up Western Australian since probably when Fyfe won his Brownlows. I guess I don't know. I don't think there's anyone that crazy. Maybe even the Judd days, perhaps. It's been a massive, whirlwind for him. He's had his first hit out. I know you mentioned that he didn't have a great one. I'm willing to cut the kid some slack, considering that it was his first hit out. People were tired. Yes, he was cramping. It was a tough game. It was a tough game for him to participate in. A bit of, I suppose, he's been hyping himself up. He's tried to do some fend-offs here and there. He's going to have to find his feet. So I'm not going to be quick to crucify the kid because he's the one who's had a lot of attention. I don't think he's the one who's been asking for that attention by any stretch. It's just that's what the media has done. And unfortunately, when someone gets hyped up so much, that it's that tall poppy syndrome sometimes, it's tough. So I'm willing to give the kid a break. I'm not going to be harsh on him. It's very similar to what happened with Luke Jackson last year at Fremantle. A lot of media pressure on him, but I honestly thought that his game last night was wonderful, was sensational, did really well up forward, just clunking some marks, kicking some goals. So I think if you're a Fremantle fan, I think you walked away with that pretty happy. Obviously not ecstatic over the moon, but I think you're in a positive situation because you're seeing, yes, you lost Schultz, but you're sort of seeing that the youth come through and perform quite well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there were some great signs. We'll probably talk about Nat Fyfe in the Freo part, but just having players like him, guys who've been perpetually injured, play at least a quarter and then play a half. So, yeah, Freo, a lot of people have Freo at the bottom of the ladder. They're like, cool, just maybe they break out of the bottom 4, that kind of thing. But I don't know. If they get everyone together, could move up a bit closer.
All right. I guess seeing as we're starting to talk a bit more about Fremantle, I think now might be a good time to move in and speaking specifically in relation to these Fremantle players. And we'll start off with Luke Ryan, who I know some people have been asking us about Luke Ryan over the preseason because of his scoring. He's got a decent ceiling. His floor isn't the worst either. So people think, and he's got the goodbye, obviously playing for Fremantle. So people might be thinking, have thought along the way, maybe Luke Ryan could be that guy. I wasn't entirely on the pick after hearing the reports that him rolling his ankles and that he can't kick more than 40 meters. I did not see that. I thought there was a few times where he just hoofed the ball long down the line again.
Yeah, it wasn't the best, some of the kicking. And one of the other things too, I'm not sure if you picked up on it, but they were just talking about it in George's Discord. Shout out to the boys. Luke Ryan took a knee to the ribs, basically couldn't play some of the game, and then couldn't even drive home. He was in that much pain, like later on as well. So we might not even see him next week, depending on how he's going. But yeah, I didn't think he was back to his pure best. There were times where he was taking kick-ins, that kind of thing, but it did just seem like blind long kicks. The short kicks, fine. They weren't too bad. But there were some times in the game where it did seem like blind long kicks. One of the things I will say, though, about the Freo backline is that it's still a bit of a work in progress with Hayden Young taking a bit more of a midfield role. And they do love the chip kick. They love the chip kick. They love a switch. Versus, I think every other team that we saw but for all the other games this week, we just didn't see it as much. There were definite times when the pressure was on, they'd switch up the field or they'd look to do that and then try and push it off that way. And I think a lot of teams just kind of powered through it. This time they'd have their runners and go through there. So maybe it's a bit of a game plan change for them as well.
I like that you mentioned the runners. I'm actually going to skip Young because I think one of those real prominent runners that you mentioned was this guy. I was a big fan of Jordan Clark's game. I thought
very, very well.
He was wonderful off halfback.
Yeah, he really was. Commanding the field, kind of being like your pseudo. I'm not going to say Nick Dacos mold, but they're all trying to be a Nick Dacos mold at the moment. Every team's trying to have one, just a quick halfback player that kind of does really nice things. I don't think Jordan Clark has the ball skills to do it, but in the absence of Hayden Young being in that role, Jordan Clark's really stood up in the game yesterday. He was phenomenal. I think he was close to their best player on field over the 4 quarters.
I agree.
Even probably Luke Jackson are the two that I would probably say, hey, they did very, very well.
I mean, I agree with that.
But those two.
I reckon Clark was their best on ground. Played for the 4 quarters by the looks of things, if I recall correctly, but he was definitely very prominent. Obviously, was helped out a little bit by West Coast's inerrant kicking going forward, sometimes just sending the ball right back to him for an uncontested mark. I don't think he quite played the Nick Dacos role. I think if you're going to be a Nick Dacos, it's you really just simply almost playing completely unaccountable, willing to push high up the ground, hit the scoreboard and things like that, like just simply following the ball wherever it goes. I don't think Clark was to that extent. Clark was definitely a halfback, distributor and runner of halfback, which was a role that sort of freed up for him, of course, with Young, as we mentioned, moving into the midfield. Young still did have stints playing off halfback a little bit, and I didn't like him there anywhere near as much as I like Jordan Clark. His line breaking ability was really good. Unsure, to be honest. I don't think he's Supercoach relevant. I'd have to definitely keep an eye on him before, if you have a spot in your team because you've had someone like an Elliot Yeo, for example, who's around that price. I definitely think out of those two, I'd prefer a Clark over a Yeo, who I don't know if his body will hold up. He did look pretty good, but we'll leave that for the West Coast game. But I like Jordan Clark's game a lot. Keep an eye on him.
Yeah, if he was maybe like a Connor Buderick price, I think we'd be more inclined to actually chuck him in our teams. But for 61K, you're basically just an underpriced keeper at that point. So it's a bit tough.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what's he priced at? His break even is 82. So for him to make 100, for him to make like 100,000, he'd have to go about 102. So, it's
rough.
Unlikely, but we'll see. Never say never. We've mentioned this guy a couple of times, Hayden Young. What did you think of his game?
And I do that long pause for a reason. I wasn't that impressed.
Dramatic effect.
Yeah, I wasn't that impressed, to be honest. I came into the game expecting a lot more, especially like from all the preseason hype and everything that we've been saying. Cool, lock him in. He's got the role. He's doing really well. Beating up basically on a much worse team on paper than what like Freo was. I felt at times he was definitely around the CBA, but more of a defensive role. He didn't go in and burst from the packs and take the game on. He was kind of the guy that stood back and made sure the ball didn't go into the Freo defense. And then at times as well, he found himself across the half back line again. So, I mean, the stats would probably say, cool, he had 25 touches and effective kicks and whatever, but it wasn't what I had expected from him. I think he had a lot better of a game last year. And I'm not sure if the midfield makeup, we'll talk about a few players later on who rotated through those positions, but I'm not sure if it was just a case of, cool, he's going to play some of the midfield time, and then they're going to rotate some other players through there. We spoke about Nat Fyfe only playing a half as well, and some other people. So, yeah, I'm somewhat questioning the pick, and I need someone to come in and actually convince me for next week. Like, I need him to kind of say, hey, look, last week was just weird. Things were happening now versus an actual team. Like, he's going to have a majority mid-roll and, score super coach points, Joe.
Yeah, I actually did predict that this is the sort of role that he would play in my $0 perfect, centimeter perfect team that I had released that afternoon. So if you haven't seen that, head on over, check that video. I'm very pleased with that $0 team. I think it's pretty damn good, if I may say so myself. But I did predict in that video that Hayden Young would be a bit more of the accountable defensive type midfielder, and that someone like a Serong is going to be the primary ball winner, especially when you got someone like a Fyfe as well. You can't have everybody see ball, get ball. Think you're going to have some defensive players. And dare I say it, Hayden Young almost had the Will Setterfield role in the midfield, that defensive midfielder. It almost looked like that. But at the same time, I'm still very firmly on the pick because, as you mentioned right off the top, Big J, Fremantle listed 42 odd players for this game. And so I think this really was just a hit out for all of them, rotate some people through there. I don't really believe that that is how they're going to play season proper when we have obviously 23 people as opposed to 42. So I'm still firmly on the pick. I think at his price point in the back line for 525,000, I think the value is still very much there, and he will have the occasional spike game. And remember, he might be playing midfield, but we've got him in our back line, and the scores that he needs to be a primo in the back line is less than for primos in the midfield. So
no, that's true.
Still
I
on
guess
Young.
kind of we would be expecting him to go for that kind of 110, 115 average that he did average in the second half of those games at the end of the year last year. So, yeah, if you can't do that, even if he does become that more accountable player, like you're saying, Joe, it might just not be good enough.
But if he goes 105, I think that's good enough for me. If he goes 105 as opposed to 110 or 115, I don't mind if he's going 105 with that great buy playing for Fremantle. And if he's going 105 for the year, that's top 6. That's a top 6 defender who has the best buy. And he's cheaper than McRae, who we anticipate would go 100. So if this guy goes 105 in the back line for less than McRae, who we had penciled for 100, then in that and with a good buy as well, I'm still firmly on Hayden Young at this point. I'm not, as you guys might be able to tell, I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. As I've said, last year I was heavily sucked in by the practice games. I changed my team as a result, and then I had to use trades during the season proper to fix it again. I'm just having an open mind. His role was there. He was in the midfield. Yes, sometimes he pinched hit in the back line, but ultimately he was primarily a midfielder. And I think he will score well enough to give us keeper stats, keeper scores in the back line. A question we have, though, do you reckon Caleb Serong can do that? Can Caleb Serong give us keeper status scoring, you reckon? No, in the midfield.
I was just checking if you knew what we're talking about. I definitely think so. The number 3 from Freo was very, very, very impressive in the game. Even with all the positional changes and things like that, he basically played the full 4 quarters and he looked really good. There were times where I think maybe he turned over the ball a couple of times or went missing for like 5 minutes, but when he was on, he was very, very good. And I think gauge next week, as you say, Joe, to see where his performing is, but I think he looked a lot better than Brayshaw. And I know we're very divided on this, but Caleb Serong basically played all mid, always around the ball, and burst from the stoppage and did what he did last year to become basically elite, rated in every stat in the AFL. So for his position, so yeah, he looked very, very good.
And that's why every time throughout this entire preseason, whenever anyone has asked us, do we prefer Serong or Brayshaw? I think we've always maintained from the very beginning of the preseason that Serong, because of the surety of him being an on-the-ball midfielder attending centre bounces, we know where he's going to be. It's his best position. He's not going to play wing. He's not going to play halfback. He is a bulk centre bounce attendance player. Brayshaw is capable of playing on the outside so much to the point where he can be pushed out to a wing. And that's been our concern throughout the entire preseason. And then lo and behold, that's exactly what we saw in this game. He started on the ball in the first quarter, and I honestly thought this guy was pushing for claims for best on ground at that point. He was so good. Though every time he got the ball, he did something well with it. He was busting tackles. He was hitting targets. He was running hard. And I'm like, oh, baby, Andy, look at you go, man. And then second quarter, disappears, stuck on a wing. And it's just like, oh, boy, that's not what we want to see.
Yeah. We'll talk about now, I guess, Jeremy Sharp. I should know that name because Jeremy Sharp basically not playing, and all preseason he was penciled through that wing role, doing very, very well there. Missed the game due to illness, which may have pushed Brayshaw into covering that position because a few of these other players like Johnson, Erasmus, not so much Amira, but Will Brodie can basically only play midfield. So when they were rotating through there, Brayshaw obviously still has to play, so he was playing wing because Jeremy Sharp probably wasn't playing. So we'll watch till the thing next week. He's not injured, don't jump off the cliff and be like, no, we can't pick him anymore. But he did miss the game, and obviously that moves players around a little bit. When Andrew Brayshaw did play through the middle, I wasn't that impressed. I think Serong did a lot better, and we can see kind of the discrepancies even when both of them play in the midfield, like in their scoring. But Brayshaw's still a fantastic player for that price. And sometimes the 15K difference or the 13K difference between the two matters. So, yeah, something to watch out for, but it's still pretty good.
It seems like Serong, though, with that role, is more likely to push the 110 to 115 average, whereas a Brayshaw, whereas if Brayshaw's playing more wing, I still think he will play on the ball. I don't think he's gonna play a lot of minutes on the wing. I do think he's still primarily going to be around the midfield, and then at times he might be pushed out to a wing, especially with all of their players out there. But it just comes down to a question of what they want to do with these guys. I know Fyfe is going to be heavily managed. He only played a half, but they gave quite a bit of time to O'Meara around the ball. I know Brodie really came into the picture later in the piece in that practice game, so I don't think he's in the primary rotations. I still think this guy is trying to fight his way back in. Especially, I don't think he's ahead of Brayshaw. I don't think he's ahead of Serong. He's definitely not ahead of Johnson at this point. Johnson had a lot of CBAs. He's not ahead of Fyfe, clearly. So I honestly think Brodie managed to just enjoy his hit out last night. I don't think he's really going to be pushing Brayshaw out onto a wing. It might be this guy more often, though, because he seems ready to take that next level at senior level.
Yeah, we knew kind of signs that he did over last year, but never really kind of took the spot, maybe from injuries or just kind of people putting him out of this position. But yeah, he looked good in the game. One of those guys that really beat up on the weaker team. And you could see over the 4 quarters, Freo brought in some more players, that kind of thing, who were definitely fresher than the other teams' players, so West Coast's players. And then West Coast lost Jimby halfway through the game as well, that we'll talk about soon. So, yeah, West Coast tired, Matthew Johnson, Erasmus, a few of these other guys just beat up on these players who've been playing 4 quarters. So, yeah, take that into account a little bit. Obviously not going to be super coach relevant, but in terms of Freo, maybe Damo is going to watch this episode and tell us off about Matthew Johnson's no good. But, yeah, we'll wait and see and let him do that for us.
No, they really rate Matthew Johnson. I think they're really excited for this guy to play more. Whether that's at the expense of a Brayshaw, I don't think they necessarily will want that. I think if they're going to prefer anyone, I mean, we can sort of talk about him now because we are talking about that midfield rotation. I think they know that Nat Fyfe's not going to be around for their next premiership.
Yeah.
This is his 2 years now on his contract, and I can't see him playing beyond that. With all the mileage on his body and all those injuries that he's had historically, Nat Fyfe, I can't see him going beyond these 2 years. Even seeing out these 2 years would be amazing, and that's why they're heavily managing him. Only play the half of footy. Now, do they want Nat Fyfe in there taking into Johnson's time, or do they want Nat Fyfe in there taking into Brayshaw's time? That's going to be a question that they're going to have to answer, and they might necessarily think, yes, we do want Nat Fyfe because we saw him. He was very decent. He was contributing. He was dishing out some nice handballs. Yes, he got caught every now and then because his legs are gone. There is no speed there. I could probably roll a bowling ball faster than Nat Fyfe running, to be honest. So, yeah, I don't know. It's a question mark. Got to keep a close eye. This guy throws a spanner in the works for Supercoach owners in terms of what's happening with this midfield mix. But he could be an option himself in our forward lines.
Yeah, I think Nat Fyfe plays until Nat Fyfe can't play anymore. And the reason why, like all preseason, everything like that, they've been talking about Nat Fyfe's fit, doing well, whatever. Take that into this game, and the conditions weren't exactly the most favorable for a player wanting to just take the steps, right? It was very humid, very hot. There, a lot of running, things like that. So cool. Nat Fyfe, I think, after he put on his shoes heading into the 3rd quarter, was basically like, yep, I'm okay. We're just taking the motion. So if he plays, Joe, here's a question for you. If Nat Fyfe plays the full game next week and looks decent, are you going to pick him? Or are you like, nah, Nat Fyfe, no worries?
It's a tough one because history is, if you don't learn from history, you're doomed to repeat it.
Mm-hmm.
And Nat Fyfe, we've heard this before, that he's fit, he's firing, he's flying, he's doing well, and then season comes and he breaks down. Like it's not a surprise. We've seen this happen before. If he plays all 4 quarters next week in that match sim, you're gonna have to consider it. Like you can't not. But at the same time, if he plays for the full 4 quarters, then I might be nervous about starting. But then again, he doesn't play around 0, so I might have to start him just out of FOMO almost. If he does pop off and he plays for 3 quarters of a game or a half and a little bit, and in that half and a little bit of the game, he scores 80s, then he can, in the occasional spike game, if he scores 95, then he'll make his money and I can trade him out sooner rather than later, perhaps. Yeah. He could be a quick money maker, but if he's being managed heavily and he's only playing like half a game, maybe not. Because so what happens if they get an injury in the first half? Then he has to play out a whole game, which obviously means that he's not being managed, which obviously means he's more likely to break down. So I don't want to waste trades on severely injury-prone players. I just don't want to do that.
Yeah, I think for me, if he can make it through the next week and then things are looking good heading into round 1, because obviously Free don't play round 0, he's basically a lock for me, I think. If he can survive the first 6 weeks or so, that's all we need. And with his scoring and kind of what we saw, if that was replicated for the full... I know me and you were very torn on how good Nat Fyfe did yesterday. But if Nat Fyfe can make it through a full game next week and he looks good heading into round 1, I think you can bank on him. If he can survive 6 weeks. 6 weeks isn't a long time. If he can survive 6 weeks,
it is for him.
400K.
It is for him.
But if he can get to 400K, cool. Then, like, you've made your money. You can offload him as your first upgrade target. So, you know.
He's not going to. He's not going to do that. He's not going to do that. He can't handball his way to $400,000. He
didn't though. I think he even kicked. Did he kick a goal yesterday, or he at least did some stuff?
No. He was almost all handballs. I think he only had like 2-3 kicks last night from memory. So I don't think a guy can handball his way off a half of football to $400,000. If he can handball his way to $400,000 in 6 weeks and stay healthy in those 6 weeks, then I would have seen everything. I just don't think the odds are in his favor to do that. To score incredibly high just off handballs, he needs to be able to kick, and he won't be finding space with that with that lack of speed. So I guess we're going to watch him next week. Clearly, this pick is a little bit divisive. But thankfully, we still have next week to have a see. Let us know in the comments down below, guys. What do you think? Is this guy firming in your calculations?
Yeah.
Or not? So
yeah, definitely. Heading over to some more players who impressed. So let's go the guys that didn't impress first. Jago O'Meara, 449K. I don't think he's going to do enough for us in Supercoach. He's not the Matt Crouch, Nick Martin type of player. So I think he's, probably not there for us. Similar with Will Brodie, as we've spoken about before. Sean Darcy and Jackson. I think Darcy was serviceable versus BJ Williams, because obviously Matt Flynn will talk about him next, but he might be injured for quite a long period of time. So Sean Darcy was serviceable, but not fantastic. Someone who was fantastic, though, was Luke Jackson, Joe. So I was very impressed with Luke Jackson's game, and I can see him averaging kind of that 100 that we need him to, just for the amount of goals and how prevalent in the forward line he was. His opponent, Brodie Hoff, was undersized compared to Luke Jackson, because they don't really have anyone else. But watch him versus an actual forward line. He's mobile enough to take those marks and isn't terrible kicking goals. So if he's doing that alongside rucking, 95 to 100 average. I mean, that's what you're paying for him being 547K. But it's decent. If we're betting on that we're not going to get a lot of DPPs early and things like that, Luke Jackson covering one of your Gawn and Grundy through the buys, isn't the most terrible thing.
Yeah, I'm well and truly holding judgment until I see him against genuine opposition, and not
Which
against
is
Hoff. So, like you say, it's very easy to buy into players. It's very easy to fade players off these practice games. Some people go in not even trying to win, like the Bombers did, for example. So every team goes in with different mentality, with a different opinion, and I think Jackson definitely had the stars were aligned for him. Absolutely, everything was great. Same thing with this guy, Michael Frederick. He had a great game as well. I thought he was very dynamic, took some great marks, worked the ball really well moving forward as well. I thought he was very switched on as well defensively, which was good. He was almost sweating and baiting players, the West Coast defenders, to kick to a specific person, so that he can then take off really quick. He's got rapid acceleration, and he was really good out wide, trying to reach these long wide kicks that I didn't think he would get to. But I'm sorry, Frederick. Sorry, Michael. Your athleticism proved me wrong time and time again. You worked your ass off. It was very impressive.
Yeah, I think, like, real talk for a second here. Michael Frederick was almost a joke in his first season of AFL. Like, he went down in price in Supercoach, was very, very, like, wishy-washy, couldn't take marks, couldn't do everything. Over the last 2 seasons, this kid has become like a real player and almost a real threat in that forward line too. This kid, he was taking intercepts. Like, as the Gold Coast guys were chipping the ball to each other, he was running in there and getting the ball. And West Coast guys were taking chip kicks across the back line and through the midfield. He was taking intercepts. Like, he looked very, very good. He's quick. He's powerful. He doesn't mind jumping into it. Freo have got a real play here. It's just a shame he's so, like, expensive in Supercoach. If this guy legitimately, if Frederick was like 220K, I'm picking him in my team. Like, just for the fun of it, to watch him through the like, play through the early buys, get him some extra money, get him some cash. But yeah, fantastic player. Freo have got a real winner here.
Yeah, but not Supercoach relevant. As you mentioned, I think this guy is definitely more Supercoach relevant than Frederick is at 182K, playing Schultz's role, high pressure. Man, he was around the ball a few times. Was a little bit unlucky not to get his hands on it, but he was in some pretty dangerous situations, full steam ahead. He knows that the spot there is his for the taking, and he busted his ass for it. It actually looked quite good.
Yeah, him and so Tom Emmett and Cooper Simpson. So I'm just cutting in for some of our listeners who like to listen to our show, and we can't really say him, but we can say Tom Emmett. So yeah, Tom Emmett did fantastic. Kicked a couple of goals, was really used as that forward small target alongside Cooper Simpson, who was used in the second half or fourth quarter. But yeah, Tom Emmett, when he wasn't getting the ball there, he moved probably, if you can imagine the AFL field put on as 2 halves, he moved up basically to the middle of the forward half. So right in the middle, was used as that transition player, which probably lent him to not kicking as many goals as he could have, because he was transitioning the ball forward to, like, your Fredericks, who, like, were kicking the goals, versus Tom Emmett being there to receive the ball. So fantastic player. If he was a little bit cheaper, lock him in. There's a few players around his price at 182K, like your Caleb Windsor, that you're competing the price for, that you really need to go and see, like, next week what he does for him to be selectable in Supercoach.
He had a couple of shots on goal as well. He was unlucky not to score those as well.
He kicked at least 2.
Yeah, and then he missed a couple of others. So he could have had a bag himself, Emmett. And, he was playing with Schultz in the side last year, had the 2 games and averaged 81. So if we can get an 81, even without progression, even if we have another 81 from him to start at 182K, that's still a successful selection, because he's priced. He will make 150K very quickly. So if that's the case, so I'll like it. I do like Tom Emmett. Keep an eye on him against genuine opposition next week. Same thing with Cooper Simpson, who came on late. I know Freo fans reckon this guy could have been the steal of the draft. They're raving about him, and he's agile. He's good ball sense. He's hit some great passes as well inside the forward 50. I like this kid. I really hope he gets a game, because a 117K forward mid would be wonderful for our benches.
Yeah, there's a few players at a DPP position in our teams that are slowly taking up and pushing Cooper Simpson out. Preseason, he's looked fantastic. One of the only red flags I've got now is why didn't he play the full 4 quarters? Hopefully one of the Freo fans can let us know down in the comments, like, hey, why did Cooper Simpson not play? Was he injured? Did they just want to manage him being a first-year player? That kind of thing. It could have just been simple as that. He could have come in and then played the full 4 quarters from like half to quarter 6. You know what I mean? Like that period of time instead of the first 2 when it was a bit more competitive. But yeah, it's probably the only real red flag I've got for him at the moment. He didn't come on and completely dominate straight away. He did get into the game. And similar to a few other players like Johnson, was that just because they were beating up on a basically young West Coast team. So that could have been that as well. So as you say, wait till next week to kind of gauge where he's at. But previous to the round 0 games or previous to the preseason games, I think our forward options and our midfield options were very limited in terms of rookies, but definitely it started to look better.
And that was our discussion of the Fremantle players. We will now make our way to talk about the West Coast ones. So we will start off with Alex Witherden in the back line for this segment. Not much to say about him, is there?
Didn't really do much. And when he did do something, I think he turned over the ball straight away. So a lot of people have been saying, hey, is he going to take the Shannon Hurn role? And I think a couple of years ago, he was actually penciled to do that as he went to West Coast and then, what's his name from Brisbane? Adams? No? Forget his name. Harris Andrews stayed at Brisbane and became the player that he did. Both of them were basically the same talent. Andrews went well, Witherden went to West Coast and kind of flopped. So don't put him in your teams. Don't worry about him. Forget he even exists, unfortunately. But Elliot Yojo, he wasn't bad. I wanted a little bit more out of him, but he wasn't bad. And I believe he played the 4 quarters, which is definitely something ahead of Nat Fyfe, who we just spoke about before. Was majority mid, did do some handballs and some kicks and things like that through the position. So can he tempt a lot of people? Yes. Should he be in your Supercoach teams? Maybe not.
No. He was all right. Don't get me wrong. He was fine. He had a decent game without tearing it up on fire. I think without doubt the most memorable thing that he did was when it was out of a centre bounce. He received a gather and then managed to burst one tackle and burn away from Andy Brayshaw before delivering a kick inside 50. That was definitely very flashy. And I was surprised that he actually still had the confidence in his body to do so. And I heard that the commentary was talking about this guy went to Dubai during the off season, who went and had a look at his running. And that's why he has now a more upright running sort of posture and running style so that he can have his hammies sort of be looked after a bit more as he runs. So I appreciate that Yo is still busting his gut, trying to get the most out of himself. He himself knows that he is a very big injury risk. But I still wouldn't go there. I didn't think he shone particularly well. Now, given he might have been tired as the game went on and West and Fremantle kept introducing fresh players into the midfield, which obviously is a little bit unfair on him, having to shoulder the majority of the load. He was their best midfielder. I will give him that. But the best midfielder in what is going to undoubtedly be a wooden spoon team isn't going to scream very Supercoach relevant to me. So for me, he's a no, and the jury's still out whether or not he can even last a season. He's had very poor injury history in the past. So he's a no for me, and I think a lot of people who are on the pick also probably are steering away from him as well.
Yeah, I think so too. He's not in my side. You can pick him if you want, but I think there's too much risk.
There is a lot of risk. There's a bit of risk selecting this guy as well for around that same price point, but he was the one that took over the Shannon Hurn role. He was the one on kicking duties mostly, and he looked really good.
I think he even took a couple of intercepts too in the game. And as you say, when he came across from Melbourne, we knew that he was going to play 22. And I think last year he wasn't there playing on the wing. But in the game last night, maybe it was because they had a few players out, that kind of thing, something to watch for next week. But he looked good, Joe, taking kick-outs. I was like, who's that player? Oh, it's Mr. Headband, Jaden Hunt. And he looked decent. So I don't know if he's Supercoach relevant, but in terms of us doing a recap of the game itself, 100% deserves a shout-out.
He was their Jordan Clark, giving them a lot of run and bounce off half-back. And they looked so much better with the ball in his hands, moving the ball out of the back line with pace. So I would be very surprised if Adam Simpson changes that up. Obviously, there's a bunch of players out, but I honestly reckon this guy should play his new position down half-back and drive a lot of the play, which was really impressive in my eyes. I wouldn't go there myself. I'd definitely have a look at him next week. But if he's playing for a team that's going to be conceding a lot of goals and behinds, he could be a real smoky selection.
There you go.
Another smoky selection who's pretty cheap, but not overly cheap, Tim Kelly. He had a good game.
Yeah, he had a good game. Never going to be my Supercoach team outside of, I think, 1 year when he was like the rookie and it was like 117K and cool, get in my team 100%. Like made me 300K and I was very happy. But outside of that, definitely no. West Coast are going to get smashed in the midfield every week. Yes, Tim Kelly did very well and it's been good for them because I think last year and this year, it really showed why they gave up those 3 first-rounders and potentially set the team back like a few years and put them into the position they are now, right? So, yeah, good player for them yesterday, but in terms of Supercoach and everything else, like, I'd rather pick Josh Kelly. I'd rather pick Josh Kelly and have a bye than probably pick Tim Kelly. Like, it's an interesting call, but yeah, not for me, Joe.
Not for you. Not for anybody. Maybe for draft. Ruben Jimby, he's a big boy. I thought the best that he did was a lot of the tackling pressure. It seems like this guy just thrives on tackles. He doesn't really care about winning the ball himself. He just wants to give everyone a hug. He's a loving man, Ruben Jimby. Never would have maybe the name sort of gives it away. I don't know, but he loves to hug people. And fortunately, he had a head clash when he tried to hug someone else, and so he's had to be taken off the field. So keep an eye on him, but I would not be going. I know I've seen some incredible photos of his physique in recent times, but don't be baited into those sexy pics. He's not a sexy pick.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think it was in the second quarter, him and Luke Jackson had a bit of a head knock, and then Jimby came off very, very bloody and didn't play the rest of the game. So hopefully it's nothing too bad. Let the fans, hopefully the fans let us know, but yeah, in terms of Supercoach, it's a no. I think I'd rather pick Wardlaw instead of him, like if I had to pick someone at the price. But he looked good, and you can see where the future's going with the midfield. If he's fully fit, he'll probably end up at 500K. But for us in Supercoach, it's going to be a slow burn, and unfortunately, we don't actually want that in Supercoach. We want guys who make cash quick so we can upgrade to premiums.
Yep. I had to give this guy a shout out because I kept calling him Campbell Shitter last year for being so bad. But he's not Supercoach relevant. Don't put him in your teams. But I gotta say, he wasn't shit last night. So Campbell, I'll take this moment to retract my comments that I made against you last year. You were not shit. You were serviceable in a smashing. So well done to you. There was no Clay Hall because he was injured, there was no Matt Flynn because he has got a tendon issue. A hammy tendon, which normally are quite long duration recovery-wise.
Yeah, I think he did it in the captain's run on the Friday. So obviously this game was on the Sunday. On the Friday afternoon, he goes and does his tendon in his hamstring, and then potentially he's out for a very, very long time, which meant that BJ Williams, who hadn't done ruck at all in the whole preseason, in 2 days had to go back to rucking again. But what that actually did for us, Joe, is when BJ Williams went for ruck and Flynn got injured, it really opened up Cohen Livingston as a potential super coach option, and R3 as well. So definitely someone to watch. Some people said he was in the back line. I think he did a couple of things there. Some people like myself said, hey, I saw him in the forward line and he actually kicked a goal too. And after the goal, everyone got around him. So, and then he rucked at the same time. So he rucked against kind of the person who wasn't the main ruck against BJ Williams. So yeah, did very, very well for what we saw. And some people, I spoke to Jesse from True Footy on his live stream, because he obviously streams the West Coast games, his reaction to the game and things like that. I asked him, I said, hey, what do you think of the pick? And he was like, it's weird that we've played him and not played some of the other guys that were kind of in the wings ready to go and that you'd think would be the ones that were going to be picked. So potentially that means, hey, look, he either is just getting experience because it's preseason, or they like him and maybe they'll actually play him. Because he's 200 centimeters, probably, I know we don't like to talk about weights, but 95 kilos odd. He looked decently sized. Like, he was a rookie pick, but he didn't look like a first-year player. Yeah, potentially playing R3 that plays through the early buys. We're happy.
Interesting. Very interesting. If he plays, would be an absolute godsend. Playing R3 at 102 Ks would be absolutely remarkable.
With DPP as well.
With DPP as well. Oh, my Lord. Oscar Allen, not Supercoach relevant, was a lot cheaper last year, but a shout out to him. He was really impressive. Some sticky mitts, took some great grabs in dewy, slippery conditions. I was a big fan of Oscar. He's a top talent, this guy. He really is a star of the comp. Shame he's not going to be on the end of a lot of big bags playing for West Coast, but you never know. If anyone can do it, it's him. Who I really wanted to talk about was this guy. I loved Noah Long's game. He was very impressive up until, unfortunately, he kicked the football. And as he kicked the ball, he also kicked someone else's limb, a leg or something, and then he had to come off the ground limping. So hopefully it's nothing serious. But up until that point in the first half, he was wonderful. I thought he was among West Coast's best. I think he might have been West Coast's best. I loved what he did. He attacked the ball with pace. He roved all these packs so well. Some great ball use and decision-making in the middle of the ground as playing as like a high half forward. I love Noah Long's game. If he stays fit and healthy, he could be a watch out, but at this point, not anywhere near my team, but I just wanted to shout him out. I thought he had a great game.
Joe, what do you mean West Coast best? And why was it not Harley Reid? Like, number one pick, God from above, West Coast media, love child. He did not have a great game. I think he played the full 4 quarters. I reckon he had 10 touches, and Harry Sheasel in his first year was a lot better playing the same role. So, yeah, I don't know exactly what happened to him. He didn't kick any goals, was playing midfield, did 1 or 2 touches there, and all the fans were like, yeah, Harley Reid, you're so good. And the media people, obviously WA commentators are going to hype him up as much as they can as well. So when he did go to the halfback, had a couple of kicks, things like that, and there was a nice passage where I'm not sure if he took the kick out. I'm pretty sure he did. Yeah, Harley Reid takes kick outs now. Took the kick out, dodged a couple of people, ran through the forward 50. I think he was going to get pinged for not bouncing the ball, but bounced the ball and then turned the ball over straight to someone else because he just bombed it long. So hopefully that's not what you're going to see from him all season. Harley Reid, still in my forward line, everything like that. But if he's a slow burn, what's your thoughts on him? And are you actually going to pick him if he's a slow burn player?
I don't think
we know the preseason, like he's been having hamstring injuries, and there was an injury scare during the game as well.
Yeah, it was just cramp. For me, I'm still very much on Harley Reid as a selection, because he still attended some center bounces and was around the ground, and he tackled. I think tackling is quite often underappreciated, and I think he's managed to stick a few tackles. No one really burst out of his tackles, which is some good signs. So he was attending some center bounces and playing off halfback as well. So took some kick-ins. I think he's going to be given every opportunity to impact. Now, he's not a high possession type of player. He's definitely a high impact type of player. I think that's commonly known across footy circles. He just has to play every week, which I think he will. And given the nature of his roles, either playing off halfback or playing around the ball where he can tackle, I don't necessarily need him to go bananas when it comes to the disposals that he's getting. As long as he's racking up those points in those matters, whether it be from kick-in or receiving a kick-in, his field kicking was pretty good, I thought, for the most part, considering how scrappy things were and both sides were missing targets. So I'm not surprised that he was also missing targets. It's his first hit out against another AFL opposition. His first hit out ever against AFL players. So I'm not, common theme for me is I'm calming the farm. I'm not reading into things too deeply and taking them at face value. I'm definitely cutting a lot of players some slack in this first week. Obviously, would be a bit more critical of players next week, having been better now for the run. I'm still firmly on this guy as a selection. I think he's going to have learnt a lot from today's game, and he's not. You don't get taken as a number one pick in most circumstances for nothing.
Definitely.
So I'm willing to bide my time and wait for this guy another week before ultimately making my call before round one. This guy, Rawlinson, you and I both, he caught our eyes.
Yeah. Cheeky small forward who they were talking about kind of the loss of Willie Rioli and a couple of other players who were leaving. I'm not sure what's happening with Liam Ryan as well. But Rawlinson, I'm pretty sure he kicked a couple of goals, or at least was very, very close to it. Speedy small forward who looks around the mark, Joe. 102K. I didn't know about the player at all, right? Before we did this list. And then I saw 7% ownership. So maybe I'm behind the pick and everyone's been talking about him in the preseason and now I'm jumping on, or it's just because of his performance in the game, but looked very, very good. And DPP, 102K, we're talking about Livingston and some other people who are dodging early buys. If Rawlinson plays every week, 102K, he only has to average like a 40 to actually be worth it money-wise versus some other players. It's not bad.
Exactly. So that's the benefit that you get from starting these cheaper selections, is because they're cheaper, they're priced at lower. And with their priced at lower, it means that if they can match someone like a Harley Reid, for example, or more expensive type rookies, or even mid prices, or go around about that much, then they'll make a lot of money very quickly. So I don't know what the small forward stocks look like over there at West Coast, if they're all down and injured, and whether or not that means that he's going to get more of a game. But I mean, picking a small forward playing for a team tipped to be bottom of the ladder, when you think about it in that way, it's very unlikely to be a successful pick, which is a bit not too dissimilar to why people aren't picking Nick Watson, for example. A small forward for a team not expected to feature very highly. Obviously, Nick Watson's, $82,000 more expensive, but still, the common idea is you don't really want to pick small forwards in this game, and he might not even play early. So, one to look at, I guess, for the future. And with that, guys, comes our discussion of the Fremantle Dockers defeating the West Coast Eagles in their first match sim for 2024. We've spoken about a bunch of players. This is by far our longest breakdown because this one had the most controversy and a lot of Supercoach relevant players who people were highly considering in their sides. And as you can tell, Big J and I aren't necessarily on the same page with some of these selections, and it is very common, especially out there in the landscape.
And definitely, and as you've watched all our content and things like that, there's a lot of people and a lot of players in the game that we're not the same on. We don't feel the same, and it's good that, you can have differing opinions, because if everyone picked the same team in Supercoach, everyone came in here and said, cool, these are the best 30 players, no one's team would be different, right? Like, you couldn't have favorites. You couldn't say, oh, this guy does this guy does that. It's fantastic that we can do this. We've gone through all the games from the first week of the preseason, guys. Make sure you've checked them all out. We know the viewership's been fantastic. And smash that sub button. We're growing the channel. Got 18 odd days left. and do Big J a favour and sub on his birthday if you haven't already.
Yes, it's a nice little birthday wish in commemoration for the hard work. And let us know, guys, down below in the description in the comments, what do you think about these divisive people? Obviously, we're not flinging mud, and if you disagree with me or you disagree with Big J, obviously we're taking it all on board, because ultimately the more we can have these discussions, the better informed we can be when it comes to making our selections in our very precious starting teams, because you might not necessarily be able to win Supercoach from round one, but you can certainly put yourself out of the running very quickly, because those are points now that you are behind the 8 ball. So let us know about, what do you think of Fyfe? What do you think of Harley Reid? Do you agree with those ones? Do you think there's a smoky chance that
Elliot
Hunter,
Yeo.
Sorry, what?
Elliot Yeo as well. Like, are you picking
Yeah.
Elliot Yeo? Are you convinced? Because there's obviously value in the pick at 447k. Like, there's value there, but do you consider him to be a person that you can survive on, or hey, look, let someone else take the risk?
What about Jaden Hunt, for example? Or do you think that this is going to be sustainable scoring coming out from Luke Jackson? Let us know, guys, what you think of these players down below. Obviously, Brayshaw, you know what I mean? Like, is Brayshaw going to be on your radar now, having seen him play wing so much? Or do you just count that as due to lack of personnel? There's so many things to come out of this game. We've given you our opinions. We'd love to hear from you guys down below. So, and obviously we go live every Monday. So on top of subscribing, make sure you hit that notification bell to make sure that you don't miss out on any of the videos and streams that we have.
Guys, we've got our Supercoach League as well. We're plugging everything today, making it almost an hour-long video, but we'll see what happens in later on. But we've got our Supercoach League as well. Make sure you join it. Win 3 amazing prizes. The information will be down in the description, as alongside our tipping comp as well. It'll be down in there.
Because remember, guys, here at the Centre Bounce, we do the hard work, even on our birthdays, so that you don't have to.
And we give away free stuff too. So.